Season 7, Episode 11 of the Clone Wars. Shattered. Damn! That's it, that's the review. Cutting off! No, for real. Obvious name is obvious. The shattering of the Republic, the shattering of the, the peace and the victory and the prosperity, but also Shatterpoint. That very concept, which they don't do a lot with in Star Wars, not as much as I think they should. But I've always remembered the concept of the Shatterpoint and how they use it periodically. I also have to mention, this is not the first time I've seen something other than Episode 3 do some really good stuff with, what's to come. But, damn, they do some good stuff with this. The music has entered full-on Dread territory. It knows exactly what it's doing here. And we see the aftermath of Mandalore. Mostly just, kind of the thing. But it's kind of worth noting that in this aftermath, as they're talking, as we see Bo-Katan, the refuse and debris and the injured people and the blasted smoke and all that, it seems like it doesn't matter. Because, who cares about the battle for Mandalore, right? But it's such a perfect encapsulation of the war. The Clone War caused a tremendous amount of damage for the entire galaxy. Despite its relatively short length, 4 years if I'm remembering correctly, the Clone War is such a devastating event. Massive sea change for the entire setting. 3 years. It's even shorter. 3 years. It's often considered one of the most devastating wars in the history of a setting that has many, many wars in it. And yeah, I was about to say, there's a very obvious parallel there to the Great War. So Ahsoka goes to meet with the Council, and we see the scene from Episode 3, where they're sitting there debating how to deal with the Chancellor, which naturally and smoothly dovetails into them seeing Ahsoka, who is here assisting them as a citizen, not a Jedi. Minutes. I realized as I was watching this, and I'm sure you've realized I did too, minutes away from reaching out to Anakin right before that Shatterpoint. And naturally, and I started typing this before it was even showing on screen, naturally, she doesn't trust the Council. Why would she trust the Council? It's even fantastic because Windu actively pushes her out of the meeting. Now, I get why he did that, but it's funny how his own mistrust, this is, for the second time in a row, comes back to bite him on the ass. Yoda even reaches out a metaphorical hand to Ahsoka here. Did you have a message for Master Skywalker? And she even considers it for just a moment. But no. After that little maneuver, no. So, that's actually kind of it. That's kind of game. That was probably the last moment Ahsoka could have gotten in the way of that flood. And Obi-Wan, he's off dealing with Grievous. So the only two real threats to Palpatine's plan have both been effectively removed from the board. Yeah, that is the exact moment checkmate hits. Just, yeah. And so Maul is in some kind of special suspension prison thing, aware and awake, and oh my god, that's horrifying. And Bo-Katan leaves the narrative, for now. And there's a several-minute scene. This is so important to emphasize. The episode knows exactly what it's doing. And I know this is designed as a movie, but still, in a 22-minute episode, you spend several minutes, several critical, huge portions of your episode on functionally showing nothing. Just letting the episode breathe. As Maul is slowly put into his cell in a cell. As we know the timeline, Anakin has just gone to confront Palpatine. We know what's coming. Yeah, just letting that dread sit there. This is the equivalent, to keep going back to that old Hitchcock analogy, of hearing the ticking in the background. I have so much positive things to say, but this is such a wonderful sequence. Ahsoka walks out. There's not even hiding anymore. She walks out onto the bridge of an Imperial destroyer, right? I know she's technically on an acclimator, or not an acclimator, a Venator, but that's an Imperial bridge. They even go out of their way to show the difference. Clearly Imperial officers saluting her as she goes by. The lighting, the styles, the approach. It's already happened. This is exactly what was being mentioned earlier. This is exactly what Maul said. We have already passed the point where the Republic has fallen in every way that matters. Yeah, it will in fact be legally an Imperial ship in a few hours. And she has this wonderful conversation with Rex in this moment of dread and horror and suspense and tension. She speaks about friendship and about how, despite all of the hardships of the war, she cannot bring himself, both of them actually, cannot bring themselves to regret it. And they feel like it was worth it for what they gained out of it. And as they peacefully pass through hyperspace, we know what's happening. And Ahsoka goes through something, and the motion capture and the facial capture do a great job of conveying this. In real life, we call it anxiety. Or more accurately, anxiety disorder. For those of you not aware, anxiety disorder is actually something we understand quite well. It's when a part of your brain is activating your fight or flight reflex with no input, right? Nothing's causing that. And so you tend to act a little bit more irrationally because your chemicals, your electricity is telling you, oh God, oh God, oh God, when there's nothing to source. And the human brain is very well designed to seek out patterns in things, and thus can invent patterns in things, which can lead to other problems. You can see things that aren't here, imagine things that aren't there, and that therefore must logically be the source of this anxiety you're feeling. We're only still, within the last like 10, 20 years, starting to really understand this one specific disorder of how our brains work. And I bring this up in relevance to this specific episode because it's a little bit different for Jedi. They have the Force. They can literally sense things. And you could tell she is anxious and has absolutely no idea why. And Maul is freaking out. He knows exactly why. And it's this wonderful moment. Because you can feel it. Maybe this is me reading too much into it, but you can feel that she feels this should be a triumphant moment. She should be relaxed. She should be like calm. They did it. They beat Mandalore. They're beating Grievous. The Clone War is over. They're coming back with their prisoner. She's gonna go meet Anakin. It's cool, but it all feels wrong. And then the Shatterpoint happens. Anakin's choice. And it's juxtaposed immediately with something that we've all been waiting for, right? Something so horrible. The bomb finally goes off. Execute Order 66. And interesting enough, what is Rex's reaction to that? Yes, Lord Sidious. Not the Chancellor, not Palpatine. This has been so programmed, planned for. I don't know how else to put this. And so what we have immediately in the wake of this is Rex's last bit thing. I wonder how things would have gone if he hadn't gotten out of that warning. And he could barely talk. Wonderful praise to the acting and the writing. Find him. Find him. Find Fives. Fives. Find Fives. And then they just swarm her. They just absolutely swarm her. Notice their anti-Jedi tactics, by the way. I'm going to bring this up later. But we saw this in the movie as well. And we see this in other things, too. They overwhelm with firepower. Completely surround her. and just fire non-stop barrage into where they believe she is, trying to completely overwhelm the Jedi's defenses. And there's even this wonderful scene where she glances at the ceiling for like a millisecond and then goes back to blocking. And then we see later on as the camera pans through it that she's been deflecting their bolts into the ceiling to be able to bring an escape route. Brilliant cinematography there. Don't have to lay it out. So then they go to kill Maul. And then as soon as they're going to kill Maul, something clicked for me. Rex flat out says, "We are now taking out all the Jedi." But no. Logically, whatever's on that chip is probably a list. Because Maul isn't a Jedi, and neither is Ahsoka. That list is probably the kind of thing that either Palpatine updated a while ago, or has been keeping up to date as time moves on. Exactly, he's going after Force users. All Force users. So they go to kill Maul. Ahsoka frees them. Notice Ahsoka goes out of her way not to kill the troopers. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, you remember that archive thing that Jedi used? Oh yeah, by the way, Anakin, not on that list. And only now does Maul truly understand the scope of the plan. He's turned the Jedi's own army against them. There's this wonderful tidbit, only together can we survive this. And she says, "No, I need a diversion and you're it." That is such an Anakin strategy. I wonder if she'll end up regretting it. There's something wonderfully horrible about all of these sequences. I cannot possibly do a good job of summarizing this sequence. The troopers who still have Ahsoka's colors on them, the former members of the 501st, who are desperately talking about how they need to try and find and kill her. The music does this wonderful thing. There's this beat going through it. I know my own music doesn't apply to this. And it's very tense as it's following Ahsoka. But then it goes to Maul. The tempo, the beat doesn't change at all, but it adds a whole other layer of layers of instruments on top of it, and it suddenly becomes a march. Yeah, Maul going through the hallway is just pure poetry, and I have nothing else to say about the way he absolutely brutalizes his way through the corridor. Rogue One was before this, right? Because you can't tell me that was on accident. And Maul's anger and rage as he's just slamming through the troopers. And of course, he even pulls the guy through the door to make sure he can get a comm. By 4 years. That's what I figured. Because Season 7's pretty recent. And yeah, this is one of the reasons why the clones have such tactics when it comes to taking down Force users. I love how Ahsoka is still trying to figure out how to fix this situation. She's not trying to kill the clones. She probably could manage that just like Maul is. Instead, she's trying to fix what's going on. But she doesn't even understand the problem yet, so she has to look into it. She finds the report from Fives. Thankfully, Anakin doesn't change his passwords. Nice reference, by the way. And Rex also destroys all the escape pods on the ship as an emergency measure. Think about that for 5 seconds. It means that the one really giving the orders here, which is Palpatine, considers the clones and the personnel and the materials and the ship itself all completely disposable to accomplish its objective, killing Jedi. In this case, 2 people. And that's very Palpatine. Indeed, this entire war has been the kind of thing he was willing to throw away. Millions upon millions of lives just to move a few pieces on the board. Of course they're all expendable to him. Now I want to say something else here. Yeah, good soldiers follow orders. Oh, man. Yeah, no, that absolutely works against them several times, Blade Duvall. That happened in Jedi Fallen Order as well, if I remember correctly. I've spoken against the control chips, the inhibitor chips, several times off and on, ever since they were first introduced. If I might defend myself on that point for a second. When the inhibitor chips were first introduced, which was, I believe, during Clone Wars, there was a whole thing prior to that about the nature of how the Jedi trap worked. And that particular perspective worked in a vacuum. And I stand by that. to be clear. I do stand by the idea of the clones just following orders and therefore just gunning down people without any remorse. There's nothing to sense, etc., you know, blah, blah, blah. And I do think with the way things were back then, the lack of the chips worked very, very well. But just like Maul, I don't mind the retcon. Unlike some idiots on the internet, I actually understand that retcons can be a good thing. And there's a lot of power in what's going on here, as these people are desperately trying to gun down their friend and ally, who they had so much respect for that they kept calling her commander, even after she has actually left their service. Yeah, actually, the very nature of the clone army itself is a retcon. So, with the chips, all of this works very, very differently, and I'm with it. Yeah, exactly, Luthor. Pretty much, I agree. Pretty much the moment they decided to make the clones people, like characters, the chips were kind of a logical byproduct. In fact, speaking as a writer, I guarantee you someone somewhere in some meeting was like, hold on, this doesn't make sense all of a sudden. What do you mean? Well, we've introduced the clones as characters, and now they're people, and now they're probably going to have issues gunning. Oh, yeah. We got to fix that. Because that's how a lot of writing works. It's like real life, actually. We introduce a problem, and now we have to fix that problem, which usually introduces another problem, right? And so as we develop fiction, as we develop our stories and our worlds, we're like, hold up, there's another problem here. And so the chip was their solution to that problem, right? That's speculation, but it wouldn't surprise me if it lined up that way. I love the droid squad. I actually don't have anything else to add to that. I just love the droid squad. Random question. Anybody in chat? When was the USB invented? The only reason I had an issue with the chips originally, which I do not shy away from, was that it sort of completely destroyed the original point of not having the chip. But I do agree. With the clones having personalities and people and characterization, you kind of need the chip. And even regardless of that, they've done some good stuff with it. So, 1996, fascinating. The reason I ask is, I keep calling what the droids do USBs. I'm sure it's not true, but there's this really weird thing in real life where fiction sometimes posits an idea as science fiction, which then people take and turn into something that actually works. Obviously, there's a list that people keep track of the stuff Star Trek has predicted in real life. I wonder if Star Wars predicted the USB. They've all got that little bzzz slot. Even in the prequel era, they've all got that bzzz slot, and it was from the original trilogy, too, all the way back in A New Hope. So that's the 70s at that point. Late 70s, but still. Food for thought. Anyways, so, he was very much a tech guy, that's true. He was a tech geek, and he was very much pushing the limit. So they can't find the chip with scans. That threw me a little bit. Just for a bit, that threw me. But then I started thinking about it. If they were pick-upable by any random medical scan, pretty much everyone would be able to find it immediately, right? Like any random, just touch-up would immediately be like, hey, there's a chip in your brain. Huh? And yeah, right? there's a lot of logic to that. I found myself wondering if there's a little bit of force tech in the chips. You'll notice the specific way she finds the damn thing is with the force, by channeling it through him, quite literally into his brain. And we know that force tech exists in this setting that specifically cannot do anything unless it is activated by the force. Food for thought. So then, Rex shoots his own troops. And then there's that thing I mentioned earlier. How widespread is this? The entire Grand Army of the Republic is hunting Jedi, and this is the exact same strategy that they've been using to kill Jedi. Overwhelming force to bring down a minuscule number of people. And once again, we see that on the macro scale, Palpatine is willing to sacrifice God knows how much just to kill off all the Force users, to deprive the galaxy of the one resource that he commands most mightily. And yeah, for anybody who actually plays RTS games or strategy games in general, this is usually called the Swarm faction. Sometimes Macro faction, because it's the same general concept. How do you beat your enemy? Well, I've got 700 troops and you've got 8. And the episode actually ends right there. As weird as it sounds, I'm still not sure where this is going. Like, the axe has fallen, right? The bomb has gone off. Order 66 is actively activated, and they're on a ship with no escape pods. So, yeah. How do we rate this one? Yeah, Maul's still there doing his thing. As is his wont. I agree with the crowd. This is already an extremely good episode, and I feel silly even explaining this. No, there is no Above Purple. I mean, there is StarCraft 2. But I've never seen an episode that's hit StarCraft 2 levels of any show. But the extra oomph on this one, there's actually several, but the one that really works for me is the lead up to Order 66. The several minutes of dread and of tension and of power as we're just sitting there waiting for that damn bomb to go off. That was so powerful. That was so fantastic. Let's go ahead and see how this ends, shall we? See y'all in about half an hour.